Hello, Wine and Dine listeners. This month, we are going to be featuring a winery called Hanson Vineyards. This is a family-run winery. And the really cool thing that we found out when we were visiting this winery is that the winemaker originally went to college in Ithaca, is from Oregon, but went to college in Ithaca, spent some time in Washington, D.C. He was super cool to talk to because he was more in the lawmaking side. So we had a little conversation about that, and then moved back to Oregon and his family farm with very, very deep roots in the area to, which I loved because they actually have that family farm and very deep roots. Of course, I loved that it was deep roots with Rooted Planting Group, but we had a chance to actually talk with them, with the winemaker when we were there. So much fun. If you want to follow him on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, it's Hanson Vineyards. So you can follow them there. But one thing that I discovered when I was there was that his great-grandfather's winemaker's great-grandfather was originally from Norway and moved to Oregon in 1896, purchased the farm that was across the road from the winery. They then took the property into a winery in 1930. So that's when it says very deep roots. That's what they mean. Well, let me tell you, we love their wine. Of course, they had a good Pinot Noir. That's what Oregon is known for. But today, what I'm going to talk about is their Gamay. The Gamay Noir is one of the different grapes that exists, and we loved it. It was unique. It was dry. It was mouthful, flavorful, really savored the wine. So if you enjoy something different, go try the Gamay Red that they have. It's $26 per bottle. Good price point. Of course, if you're going to have it shipped, there's additional costs associated with it. But we really enjoyed their Gamay. They do have a club that you can join if you're interested. Not trying to sell this company, of course, but I do really think that if you're looking for something different, there's no cost to join, which I absolutely love. If you get out to Oregon, there's complimentary wine tasting for you and your guests. You get 15% off the first 12 bottles each year. And then if you go beyond that, you get 25% off. You also have access to new and limited wines. And they do have some invitations that you can get invited to. One is out in July. Maybe it changes different each year. And then they do invite you to vertical tastings. Now, of course, we won't be able to be there, but we did talk to Jason, the winemaker, and ask if there's any way we could virtually do that. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. If we learn more, we'll certainly let you all know. One thing that I loved that Jason said to us is whether you're a wine connoisseur or a novice, I should say, he's very open to questions. And he really, truly embodied that. So, he said no questions are a dumb question. And we can usually get pretty deep in the weeds if you want, which is what we loved about our conversation. So we'd love for you to hop out onto their website, explore them. We're going to post a link in the Facebook page. And if you do happen to buy anything from them and he wants to know how you found out about us, just drop our name, Amy and Brent Irvine, or Wine and Dime Podcast. Thanks, everyone. We hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Every week, it's our goal to share financial information that helps you in both your financial life and financial vineyard. We hope it takes you from your roots to the journey of your vines and the influences in the air that help craft your delicious life. Like wine, life and finances have different palates that should be celebrated and not judged. Welcome to this edition of Wine and Dime with myself, Amy Irvine, and Becky Eason. Becky, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be back.
Becky and I have a power-packed discussion today that many people may be wondering about, especially with the most recent announcement of student loan repayment being deferred yet again, but also because in May, we see a lot of people graduating from college, and now it's time to pay the piper on some of those loans. So we're going to be talking about how to deal with student loans and options to help pay off those student loans. But first, before we dig into that, this month I'm featuring wineries that I want to go explore when I get back into New York this month of May that are on Cayuga Lake. Cayuga Lake is a cute little lake. Well, it's not so little. It's a cute lake, a cute Finger Lakes lake that I don't often mention when I'm talking about some of the wines that I explore. And so one that popped up on the to be explored menu, I believe it's pronounced Trelehaven, I believe, Treleaven. I looked at their winery lineup. It's right up my alley. Some Pinot Noirs, some Cab Francs, some of the wines that I absolutely love. And it's one that I haven't been to. So it's absolutely something I need to go explore. So as I always say, life is about events that are supported by your dollars and cents. And that's one that I am going to go on a journey and check it out. So they also have food there for anybody that's interested. It looks like they have Sunday brunch from 11 to 4 and Friday they are open 12 to 8 and Saturday 11 to 4 for some dining options as well. So anybody who's interested in exploring Cayuga Lake, that's one of the places I know I'm going to personally explore, and I'll get back to you later this summer and let you know what I think. Sounds like if you go to their website, it's absolutely beautiful, beautiful view from their winery. So even if you don't drink wine, you may want to go just for the view. So Becky, something to think about if you and Colin are out and about and looking for a place to stop and grab a bite to eat, perhaps.
Yeah, sounds like a great summer adventure.
All right. So speaking of adventures, what a perfect segue. We have the month of May is one of the biggest graduation months for college students. Some do graduate in December, but May tends to be the bigger time that graduation is happening. So pretty soon people are going to start getting letters in the mail saying it's time for you to either make an election to defer your payment, or it's time for you to get on a payment plan and start repaying. What do you want to do? We've been basically for a little over 2 years now, student loans have been in deferment just under federal guidelines, and we're seeing that a little bit longer. Most recent news that was released. But let's talk about normal times. Let's talk about what it looks like when we normally graduate. You have a few months to defer before you basically they're saying go get a job. You have a couple months to go get a job before you start getting into payment. Once somebody graduates, let's kind of take a step back and talk about what they do. Like, what is the process?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it really depends on whether it's federal or private loans or a combination of both. So federal loans tend to have more grace around them. So usually there's like a 6-month grace period where they want you, like you said, to go get a job, get used to living on your own or whatever adjustment that may be. Mm-hmm. And then they put you on a standard 10-year repayment plan.
And what's
that's the default?
I was going to say, and what's the general formula for that?
Yeah, usually it equates to about 1% of your balance.
So if somebody borrows the typical $27,000, what would their monthly payment be?
The monthly payment would be around $270 per month.
And so that's the standard. What are some of the other options that are available?
So for federal loans, there's also income-based repayment plans. And depending on the election, there's what we call repay, which is revised pay as you earn. And then there's pay as you earn, which is called pay. And then there's also like income contingent and income-based repayment. And depending on which election you make, there's an equation that it's 10 to 15% of your discretionary income. So they take your income, they subtract 150% of the federal poverty level based on your household size. And then they take a percentage of that.
You need a map to work out some of those numbers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's also some graduated payments. And so there's graduated, and then there's, let's see, what's the other one that's beyond graduated? Because graduated steps up every 2 years. And then what's the other one?
There's some extended.
Extended, thank you. And that's more set. That's like you have a locked in amount for so many years. And it's not really based on income. It's just you're dragging the loan out, basically.
Yeah. So basically they get more interest out of you because it's a longer period of time.
Now, obviously the 10-year is the cheapest, right? Because you're getting it paid off under standard pay. And I say, obviously, it's not so obvious, because what if you're in a plan where, or what if you're in a public service forgiveness job?
Yeah. If you're in a public service forgiveness job that's eligible for what's called PSLF, which is public service loan forgiveness, then you really want to evaluate your personal situation, because depending on how much you borrowed and how much your income is, you may actually not want to be on the standard plan, because under the standard plan, there'd be nothing to forgive after 10 years.
Right. And I know a lot of people have asked the question, like, well, what if, let's say that my loan is forgiven, and we have to put it into context. This is under some kind of public service forgiveness job that we're talking about. Okay. So this is a public job that you have. You're working for the government. You're a school teacher, 501c3 type organization. Is that money taxable when it's forgiven?
Under public service loan forgiveness, it is not.
But what if I get forgiveness and I'm not under public service and I'm not disabled?
Then after, I believe it's 2025, then it is a taxable amount. Up until, I believe it was last year, it was at any point in time, but under the COVID and CARES Act, they actually made an exception to, I believe it was 2025.
So as long as the laws aren't changed again,
yep.
Then if you have forgiveness and it's not under public service loan forgiveness, then it's not taxable. What are some of the tips? Okay, so let's go back to kind of working our way back all the way to that first payment that you're talking about. $270 a month isn't that bad, but many people walk out of college with more than $27,000 in debt. In fact, I think the national average is closer to 50, if I recall from some of my research that I've done. So that means a $500 a month payment that you're going to have to make. Interest rates may vary based on when you borrowed the loan, right? There's various interest rates that you may be paying. And again, you had mentioned it depends on whether it's a combination of public or private. And maybe we should even define why that's different. What's the difference between public loans and private loans?
Yeah, public loans are actually subsidized in some cases by the government. So there's like the Stafford Direct subsidized, and then there's unsubsidized. If you have a federal subsidized loan, then while you're in school, the government's paying interest on that loan. Whereas private loans, the government doesn't help pay those loans at all. So interest starts accruing the moment you take out the loan. And so they're run by two different organizations.
And most of the time, private loans are not eligible for forgiveness under any circumstances. Even if you, sad as this sounds, even if you die, your state is technically eligible for those loans, correct?
Yeah. And they don't care if you're disabled either. They still want their payment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's something that you really need to look at those terms. If you're looking for the different types of loans, the interest rate is usually a little lower, but you're giving up some of those benefits. And if you do have those private loans, we often recommend that you really make sure that you have good disability and death and disability, especially insurance. And if somebody has co-signed for you on those private loans, then we also want to make sure you have a good life insurance so that they're not stuck paying those bills, because if they have co-signed for you and you pass away, they are on the hook for that. So be conscientious of that. Okay. So then thinking about options to pay off those loans. What if you take both loans out and you can't afford the payments? What are your options for deferring either of those types of loans?
Yeah. Public loans have a lot more options because you can go on an income-based or an extended repayment, which would allow you more time to pay if it's an extended one. Or if it's income-based, it's a percentage of your income, but not to exceed the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, private loans don't have as much flexibility. So sometimes you can refinance into a longer term, but then you're stuck with paying a lot of extra interest.
And sometimes they won't negotiate with you.
Yeah.
What if you don't make your student loan payments?
Yeah, so they can actually go after your wages. They can garnish your wages. So if you have a tax refund, they can take that because they want their money.
They want their money. And even Social Security, it's one of the few things that because most of the time they can't go after your Social Security for debt, but in this situation, this is one of the rare cases where they can actually go after and put a lien on Social Security payments as well as a percentage of the payments. Okay, so what are some of the other secrets around maybe getting those loans? Let's even back up further. How do we keep the loans to a minimum if we have to borrow? How do we keep the loans to a minimum? Because you've mentioned subsidized and unsubsidized. Let's talk about what those differences are first and what that means when the loan starts to become payable.
Yeah, so in order to be eligible for the the subsidized loan, that's the one where the government helps to pay your interest while you're in school. You have to fill out the FAFSA. So that would be the first step, is to do that. And then if you're eligible for that, take those loans out first. Because if you're in a 4-year program, then that buys you 4 years of it'd be 4 years on the first year of loans, 3, and then so forth. But that buys you time of not having interest accruing. And then if you still need to borrow more money, then go and max out the unsubsidized loan.
The words get all jumbled. I know I have that happen to me all the time. And with those, you can defer the payment until you get out of college. But with the subsidized, if you borrow $27,000, when you graduate, you owe $27,000 at that point in time. With the unsubsidized, it's $27,000 plus whatever interest has accrued over that time, is basically what you just said.
Yep.
What about private?
Yeah, private is good if you have to fill in the gaps, or if you're not eligible for federal loans for whatever reason. But that interest does start the day you take out the loans. And even though it can be a lower interest rate in some cases, you're still giving up the disability protections and, in theory, the life insurance protections.
And check the language of those private loans. Sometimes you have to start repaying those right away. So sometimes they'll defer them, but sometimes you have to start repaying those right away. And what about something called the PLUS loans or the Graduate PLUS loans? What are those? Yeah,
Graduate PLUS loans actually don't have a limit on the amount you can borrow. So you can borrow up to the full amount of the cost of your college.
So that's how people come out of college owing $200,000, $300,000.
Yep. For undergrad, there's actually a cap on the amount of federal loans you can borrow per year. And that's why sometimes you have both federal and private loans, because your cost of attendance may exceed the federal loan limit. But once you reach graduate school, you can take as much as you want in federal loans.
And with regards to those, so that's the Grad PLUS, and then there's the PLUS loan, which is actually for parents.
Yep. So parents can help their child pay for the education by taking out Parent PLUS loans. And that, in some cases, would really replace private loans.
Because they don't have a limit on those either.
Right.
They can borrow whatever the difference is.
And in some cases, it is actually beneficial for the Parent PLUS loans if the parent is in a public sector that's eligible for public service loan forgiveness, and they don't plan on retiring within the next 10 years.
Right. And with PLUS loans, most of the time the payment starts fairly quickly after, not Grad PLUS, but just the Parent PLUS loans. Most of the time the repayment starts fairly quickly, but they can defer that until the student graduates. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because the interest rate on PLUS loans is much higher than the interest rate on definitely the subsidized, which is 0 until they graduate, but the unsubsidized from that perspective as well. We try to encourage at least pay the interest down, right, during that period of time. Any thoughts on, some of the things that you've seen since you've been working in the profession? Anything that you've seen that is a common sort of, oh, you should know this when it comes to student loans?
That's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway is know that your estimated payment is generally 1%. When you fill out the paperwork for applications each year, they give you your estimated payment based on that 1 year. So it's very, deceiving because your first year, it might be an estimated, say, $70 a month. And then the second year, it's another $70 a month. So now you're up to $140 a month. And for each year, that just keeps adding on. And they don't give you that running balance.
So keep a spreadsheet or keep at least a mental note of, if I borrowed $5,500 the first year, and then I borrowed $6,500 the next year. Oh, well, that's, $12,000 right there. So my payment's now $120. And then if I borrow another $6,500 the next year and then $7,500 the following year, that's how we're coming up to the total $27,000 for undergrad loans. And if you start to borrow upwards near $100,000 or $200,000, that math is still applicable, but now we're talking $1,000 or $2,000 a month in payments. And you better have a pretty good job coming out of college to be able to make those payments or be eligible for income-based repayments. The one thing that I've seen is that people don't act quick enough when it comes to this sort of stuff. That's the one thing. They push it down the road. They're like, oh, I got a 6-month grace period. I'm going to go ahead and take that grace period till I figure it out. My recommendation often is don't do that. If you have a job when you come out of college, or especially if you are in public service, you're a teacher, you're in government, you're in a non-for-profit, don't wait because you're pushing the clock down the road. You can actually have 6 months worth of payments under your belt, or 6 months of eligible quote unquote payments under your belt before anybody else has actually started the clock ticking. And if you think about it, if you just graduate with I'll say with a bachelor's degree, because sometimes it takes 5 years, but I'll say a bachelor's degree, and you're working, if you immediately go into an income-based repayment plan, and if you're under public service loan forgiveness, that clock starts ticking the month you make an eligible payment plan. Now, that eligible payment may be zero, because if you had just graduated and last year you only had a part-time job, and let's say you earned, $10,000, well, you are under the poverty level at that point, and according to the government standards. They look at the prior year income. You're under the poverty level at that point in time. So your payment is actually zero, but that counts. So we have 6 months of payments at zero. Then you recertify in the following year, but your income is only for a partial year that following year. So your payment could continue to be either zero or extremely low. And you've got 18 months worth of payments under your belt, counting towards that 10-year requirement. And, that's probably the number one thing that I see is that people push it down the road and they shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we hope that you found this podcast helpful in your planning for graduation. We are thrilled for all of you that are starting out in your career, and hope that you all have a wonderful graduation this year and that you're able to celebrate this year with family for sure after the last couple of years and everything that's been going on. As always, we hope that you share this with your friends and share, like us on Facebook, on Twitter, iTunes is important to rate us there so that more people can find our podcast. And if you do have any questions or would like to throw a question out in our weekly newsletter called Asking for a Friend, please feel free to reach out to us. We really want to be here for you, and we hope that you continue to listen and enjoy this podcast. Thanks, everyone.
And that will about do it for today's episode of Wine and Dime. You can contact Amy through the website, www.rootedpg.com, or amy@rootedpg.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram @RootedPG for the latest news. And if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear about, feel free to let us know. And don't forget to rate and subscribe the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.